Laffer, thanks for joining me on UpFront. You've advised Donald Trump on his tax plan in the past, a plan this administration has called the biggest tax cut in history, and that you've been full of praise for. You've said Trump is phenomenal for the US economy. Given this is an administration stuffed with millionaires and billionaires and led by a self-proclaimed billionaire, is it any wonder that theirs is seen as a tax cut of the rich, by the rich, for the rich, that so many tax experts are saying this is a tax cut for the 1%, not for the poor, blue-collar, working-class voters who Trump was supposed to champion?
I don't think that's a correct depiction whatsoever, but I think it's trying to make everyone millionaires, billionaires, and trillionaires. I mean, this is a plan to get everyone to economic growth and give everyone a shot at the apple. I mean, this is a place to get economic growth, to take people off the welfare rolls, to put them on the income rolls, and to really create American prosperity, much the way we did with President Ronald Reagan and the way it was done with President Jack Kennedy as well, and President Bill Clinton, whom I supported all the way as well.
President Clinton didn't do a tax cut like this, but President Trump says this tax cut won't benefit him personally. Quote, "It's not good for me, believe me," he said. But why should we believe him? Apart from the fact that he's a pathological liar, to quote your friend Republican, to quote your friend Republican Senator Ted Cruz, unlike every president since Jimmy Carter, Trump has refused to release his tax returns. So we don't know what he's liable for, and a lot of people think he's hiding something.
They can think whatever they want, Mehdi. I haven't seen his tax return, and I really have no desire to see it whatsoever, to be honest.
Okay, well, a lot of people do have a desire because they want to know if he's giving himself a big tax cut. Let's be clear with what we do know. Let's be clear with what we do know, Art Laffer, based on this week's tax cut plan. Number one, President Trump has had to pay tens of millions of dollars in the past in the form of the alternative minimum tax, the AMT. And number two, Trump's wealth, which he says is a lot, would be subject to the estate tax upon his death. So what does this tax plan do? It gets rid of the AMT and it gets rid of the estate tax. Win-win for Trump, win-win for Trump's rich friends.
Now, very honestly, most people in the level of wealth of Donald Trump don't pay estate taxes anyways, Mehdi. They have all sorts of lawyers and accountants and get rid of it. The tax codes are full of loopholes to get around that, so I don't know what his tax planning has been, but most of the rich people will not be affected by the estate tax elimination.
That is not correct,
They really won't
On
be.
the AMT, Trump, we know, because a 2005 tax return was leaked, paid more than $30 million thanks to the AMT. Without the AMT, he benefits by $30 million at least.
No, let me just say this about that, if I can. They're also eliminating the state and local tax deduction. And now, I haven't done the calculations for Trump's personal returns, and I don't have any desire to do it either. But getting rid of state and local tax deductions would hurt him a lot. But getting rid of the AMT will help him. I don't know what the net balance is, but all
so you're
of
kind
these
of contradicting
things,
yourself. You're saying you don't know what the net balance is, but you don't want to know. You don't want to see the tax return. That's the only way we will know. We only know he paid AMT.
But I don't care about Trump.
You don't care that the President of the United States might be giving himself millions of dollars in tax cuts at the expense of others?
No, I don't care as long as he helps everyone else. The corporate tax rate reduction will increase employment output and production, brings jobs back home from abroad. It's a huge plus. Now, if you go through the econometric models and all the logic of this and all the studies, it shows the corporate tax rate reduction will have a huge impact on U.S. output, employment, and wages.
So the corporate tax cut that you mentioned, just for the sake of our viewers watching around the world,
that's my big thing.
It's down. Yes, it is your big thing. It's down from 35% is the proposal to 20%. You wanted 15. Trump, I believe, wanted 15. He wants to do that, though, at a time when corporate profits as a share of GDP in the US are higher than they've ever been, have risen dramatically since 2000, and corporate tax payments are a smaller share of GDP than they were several decades ago. Why do it now? Corporations are already sitting on lots of cash, making lots of cash, but hey, let's give them more money.
Well, no, it's not giving them money. It's giving them incentives to make profits in the future.
They're already making record profits. They're already sitting on cash piles. So is that really the place you want to direct your tax cut?
No, but what you really want to do, if I may, Betty, is you don't want them to make their money by tax shelters and evasion and avoidance and having companies go abroad. What you want to do is make them have the incentives to increase investments, output, employment, and production, which is exactly what this plan does. The reason we have such low corporate tax revenues is because we have the highest tax rate in the world, not in spite of.
You know that's only true on paper. As you yourself said moments ago, most of these rich people use loopholes and deductions to get out of it. You know very well that the effective corporate tax rate in the US is around 18-19%, lower than what Trump wants to reduce it to.
It's even lower than that.
It's even lower than that. So then why are you pretending there's some disincentive to corporations investing?
Do you know why it's low? Do you know why it's low? It's because corporations find it attractive and valuable to hire lawyers, accountants, deferred income specialists to shelter that income instead of paying the taxes. But if you drop the rate, they won't find it worthwhile, and they'll pay their darn taxes.
Well, let's look at the companies that already are paying very little tax. You would accept there are a lot of companies, as you just said.
Exxon,
GE, exactly.
Guys, yes.
GE gets a rebate in some years. They play zero.
I know, isn't it amazing?
And yet, companies like those, when you look at the studies that were done this year, you talked about economic models, plenty of studies have shown those corporations have not been increasing jobs. Despite the fact they've had no corporate tax bill, it hasn't translated into higher jobs. A lot of experts agree that cutting corporation tax rates just boosts shareholder profits, dividends, bonuses. It doesn't translate into higher jobs. You've seen those studies. You don't have to agree with them, but you know there are a lot of studies out there saying
But I know the studies better than anyone. This is my field. I've done a complete summer. Well, it is true. And I can just tell you the preponderance of information is that the corporate tax rate reduction is the thump of adrenaline into the heart of the economy and will increase output growth, production, employment. Just look at across the board. Why did all those countries in the OECD from 2000 till today, every single country except for the U.S. and Hungary in the OECD has dropped their corporate tax rates dramatically? We were the seventh highest in 2000, and now we're the highest.
And in that same period, the U.S. has had record job expansion. The corporate tax has not hurt job growth. Under Barack Obama, there was record job expansion.
That's not true.
It is true.
Obama was a terrible economy.
Hold on. Are you saying
that's why the Democrats won the election?
Expansion in recent years? You're just denying the official figures.
Of course it's not true. We have not. We had much better expansion under Kennedy and under Reagan.
We're not comparing to Kennedy. We're comparing to the rest of the world. You said that other countries in the world dropped their corporate tax rates and got job growth. I'm saying America, without doing that, got job growth. So your theory doesn't hold, that if you cut taxes, you get lots of new jobs.
Why do all these countries do it? And why did the American voters throw the Democrats out? Because they were so happy with what they did. No, they weren't.
So
it's because they didn't work.
Fine.
They didn't work well.
Let's look at the evidence.
And that's why why did they all cut tax rates in the OECD? Did they do it to get worse?
Okay. I interviewed you a couple of years ago, and we talked about Kansas. In 2012, just for the sake of our global audience, some background, you and Kansas Republican governor, oh my goodness, let me just say the point, and then you respond. You and Kansas Republican Governor Sam Brownback came up with a tax plan for Kansas, which many people say Donald Trump has borrowed from, modeled his model on. In Kansas, it's been a disaster. It's led to a budget deficit, cuts in school funding, insufficient tax revenues. It was so bad that in June of this year, a Republican-led state legislature rolled back that tax plan, brought in tax rises. Your tax experiment in Kansas, forget the studies, in the real world, we tried what you say, and it was a failure.
There are 50 states in this country. I've done lots of work with lots of states. Prop 13 in California, what's happening in Tennessee.
Are you really just going to pretend Kansas doesn't exist? Let's talk about the other 49. Look over there.
But I didn't do that. That was Sam Brownback's plan, and I did think it was a good.
Oh, come on, Laffer. Every economics journalist and economist knows that you were the main advisor to Sam Brownback on that plan. Sam Brownback has identified you as part of that plan. Are you saying you had nothing to do with that plan, or are you saying the plan was good? Which bit are you saying?
I thought the plan was good, but Sam Brownback did that plan. I didn't. I came in after he had announced his plan, but that's okay. Yeah, I think Sam Brownback's plan did help Kansas in there. Kansas has lots of other things going on: agricultural prices falling, oil prices falling, and all of that.
I think your answer concedes that it was a disaster.
No, wait a second. Now, the big test here is because of Sam Brownback's plan, Missouri cut its tax rate by 10% across the board in response so that they wouldn't lose all the jobs to Kansas. If emulation isn't the biggest form of flattery, I don't know what is.
Well, if Republicans rolling back your tax plan isn't evidence that it's a failure, I don't know what is. You said to me in 2014, give it more time. You didn't disown it then. You said, give it more time, it'll be great. Just like you're saying now about Trump's tax plan. Your predictions didn't work then. They're not going to work now, is what many would say.
Oh, well, many would be wrong.
Are you saying it was a bad plan, nothing to do with you, or you still think it was a good plan and you don't buy that it led to a budget deficit, tax revenues falling, education spending being cut?
I will tell you exactly. The plan that Sam Brownback had was a good plan. I thought it would be good for Kansas, and that is not the plan the legislature's passed that he finally signed, and I did not have anything to do with the writing of that plan, although I did think it was a good plan, and I thought it would do a lot of good, and I still think it did do good. Okay? There you go.
Okay. To be fair to you, Art Laffer, you've never claimed to be a deficit hawk or a balanced budget obsessive, but both Donald Trump and almost all Republican members of Congress have claimed to be at some stage or another. They were all up in arms over the size of the deficit and the debt, as you know, under Barack Obama. So isn't it now complete hypocrisy on their part to be supporting a Trump tax plan, which, according to non-partisan tax experts, will add $2.2 trillion net to the debt over the next 10 years?
Well, first place, those models are wrong. But I would like to say, I don't know of a politician.
Models.
I understand they are. I don't know of a politician who's not hypocritical, to be honest with you, anywhere in the world. That's their nature. They're born that way.
You and I can agree on kind of deficits. All I'm saying is, at a time when the economy is already growing, jobs are already growing. It's not a recession as it was under George W. Bush's tax cut or under Ronald Reagan's tax cut. You know, the Federal Reserve threatening to raise interest rates. Nearly 4 dozen economists told the National Association for Business Economics recently that growth won't reach the 3% that Trump claims that you suggest will happen.
But they're all 4 dozen economists are wrong on that.
Everybody's
but let me
wrong.
just say,
the models are wrong, the economists are wrong, the history is wrong, Kansas is wrong.
No, only the ones you cite are wrong, not all of them.
You haven't cited
the vast
anyone
majority.
Yet.
Well, I cited all the literature on that, on the growth there. You can find it in the academic literature. I mean, all of it, including Democrats.
The United States right now?
Cuts.
Can you point to anyone who says right now that the U.S. is going to hit 3-4% growth with a model, a published study?
Oh, I think there will be a lot. You could look at my published studies, by the way.
Okay, you can't quote yourself. Laffer, when I asked for a reference.
Why not?
Study. Okay, fine.
Why not? I've got my PhD. I've been a professor all my life,
not what I meant.
and I cite all the articles there and all the growth. I mean, but let me just say that the growth under Reagan, when we did the cuts from January 1st, 83 to June 30th, 84, the growth during that 18-month period was 12% in real terms, or an annual rate of 8% compounded annually. Same thing was under Kennedy with the go-go 60s, same thing under Harding and Coolidge, and the same thing under Bill Clinton, all of them following my models.
You're one of the few people who predicted a Donald Trump election victory last year.
I thought I was the worst predictor.
No, on politics you were good, maybe not on economics.
Oh, good, thank you.
You predicted a Donald Trump
Ebony.
election victory. Perfectly spot on last year. You've supported him pretty much ever since. I just wonder, as a leading economist and a conservative voice for several decades now, a former advisor to President Reagan, among others, how does someone like yourself persuade yourself to support, to back a president who attacks NFL players for peacefully protesting racism while calling neo-Nazi protesters very fine people, who attacks a news anchor for saying she's bleeding from her face, goes golfing almost every weekend, calls news organizations like ours the enemies of the people, lies about the size of the crowd at his inauguration, lies about the number of votes he received, lies about what's in his healthcare bill, lies about Obama wiretapping his phones, lies about, tries to start a nuclear war with North Korea on Twitter. How does someone, a smart, educated, serious person such as yourself, back a man like that?
Can I just tell you, I was in the White House from 1970 to 72. I was on the first trip to China in the October of 1970.
Which is why I'm wondering how you can support this guy.
I've been around 77 years on this planet, and I plan to be around for a lot more, so I plan a lot more discussions with you, but I've seen it all, and I think any type of singling out one president as being the worst of all bad and hypocritical in every regard and all this stuff is nonsense. They've all had their pluses and their minuses, but frankly, on economics, this guy is very good and will do a good job, and you'll see America prosper as a result. That is my opinion right as of the present.
And you trust him on the economy? You trust him? You trust Donald Trump on the economy?
So far, I trust the legislation. I don't trust anyone until it's done. And I see this legislation going through, and once it's passed, I think it will be terrific for America and for the rest of the world. Besides, by the way, no one is better off with a weak America. No one is.
Art Laffer, thanks for joining me on UpFront.
Thank you very much. It's fun to be with you again.